everyone, this week on At Home with Misty, we're going to be making this adorable Spring Sling bag. So like I said, this week we're making this adorable bag from Emmaline Bags. It's called the Spring Sling, and for those of us who are piecers, who like to quilt, there is a fun little quilted detail in this bag, so I think you're really going to like it. Let me tell you everything you're going to need to make this. Set this out of the way for a minute. So first up, you're going to need 1 yard of quilting cotton or linen for the bag exterior. I use this kind of sparkly linen, which I think is a really fun detail. You're also going to need 3/4 yard of quilting cotton for the inside, and I use this fun green kind of dot. It's really cute. And then for the quilted part, you're going to need either 22 mini charm squares or just grab some 2.5-inch squares from your stash. I actually had this Sunshine Collection by Jason Yenter pack of 5-inch squares, so I just cut this down, and I thought it was really, really fun in this project. So in addition to that, you are going to need a 12-inch by 36-inch piece of Soft and Stable. It's this great kind of foam stabilizer that gives the bag some body. And then you will also need a 1/2 yard of some light interfacing, so whatever you have around should be fine as long as it's lightweight. I use some Shape Flex, and then you will need a tiny little scrap, just 1.5 inches of some fusible Peltex. That's like a really heavy stabilizer, so if you have a scrap of that, just grab it. That's just to anchor your hardware. And then you will also need a zipper. So make sure you have that and you are good to go. So let's dive into making this great pattern, the Spring Sling bag by Emmaline Bags. Okay, to begin, we're going to make our little quilted section of the bag. It's a panel that looks basically like this that we're wanting to make. So like I said, if you have some scrap 2.5-inch squares from your stash, just grab those, and we are going to pair those up. So let me just grab a couple here of contrasting prints, and I'm just going to put those right sides together, and then we are going to draw a line or press a line corner to corner. I have this little marking pin I'll use this time. I don't always do this because I have my diagonal seam tape on my machine, but I just want you to know that this is an option to do it. You might not be able to see that chalk line, but I can, and that's what matters back at home. So then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. So now I can just put that line that I drew right on the 1/4 inch line of my machine, and I'm going to sew on both sides of it. So we'll turn around and go back the other way. Just like so. And now we can trim right on that line that we drew, and that will leave our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now we want to square these little 1/2 square triangles that we've made to 2 inches. So you can either press them open and use any ruler or squaring tool that you like. I'm going to use trimmer B from the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers. So I'm just going to lay this on here. And so my stitch line goes right on the dashed line of the ruler, and then I can trim off this excess. And I like to go ahead and cut these off as well, especially when I'm dealing with these smaller triangles, because it gets rid of some of the bulk in the seam. And so I'm just going to go ahead and trim this one as well. Again, lining up the stitch line. I'm going to trim this one on both sides just to make it nice and even and get rid of the bulk in my seam. And now that I have these squared, we can take these over to the iron and press them open. There's 1 and 2. So you'll get 2 of these little 2-inch 1/2 square triangles from each set of your 2.5-inch squares that you put together. And then you're just going to mix those all up, and you're going to lay them until they're, totally scrappy, and we're going to do 3 rows of 7 2-inch squares, and we're just going to sew them together in a panel just like this. And so you can see I have that already done. I'm going to go ahead and press this so it lays nice and flat. And I really didn't try to make a secondary pattern at all when I put these together. It's just totally random, however you pick up your squares and sew them together. So that's what you're looking for, and you might get these broken dishes or pinwheels that appear, but that's just part of the fun. All right, so then once we have that done, we are going to take this 2 by 11 inch rectangle from our outside fabric, and let me clear some of this other stuff out of the way. Another piece that is 11 by, let me double check this length so I don't tell you wrong, 11 by 20. And we are going to sandwich our Scrappy quilted section in between these two pieces. And so I'm going to go ahead and sew one of these on either side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There's that one. Now we can add this to the other side. The nice thing about using this linen is there isn't really a right or a wrong side. So it acts as a solid, even though we've got that shimmer in there, which is really nice. And then there we go. Now I can press these back. Whoops. Got a little crease there. The same thing going this direction. Okay, so in your pattern for this project, you will find a template that's called Piece A Curve Template. And so we are going to line this up, and it tells you to place this at the center. So let's go ahead and fold this and make a center crease line. Just so I remember, there is the center. And then we are going to line this up right on that center fold. And we are going to mark this outside curve. And you'll see it's pretty gentle here. And we're going to trim that. If you want to make sure that they match on both sides, we can actually fold this in half and cut it while it's folded. And then our curves will be exactly the same. We can just place this here, and I'll grab a pin. There we go, and then we'll cut this curve. Okay, so once we have trimmed the curve for the front flap of our bag, like we see here, now we need to go ahead and prep this so that we can put our clasp, which is actually the part that you're going to see underneath here. We need to put that in now. So I'm going to flip this around. I'm working on the wrong side, and I know that because I can see all of my seams from my quilted section. And we are going to measure over 5.5 inches from the bottom edge. Oops, I've got my ruler upside down. So we're going to go 5.5, and then we need to come another 1/2 inch over. So I can just straighten this up on my mat. And then I know this point right here is 5.5 by 5.5. So I'm just going to put a mark. I'm going to use a different color that might show up a little bit better for you here. There we go. I'm just going to draw a little X right there, because that is where my clasp needs to go. And so initially, I'm going to find the center of this little square of Peltex that I have, and it's going to go right in the middle there. And then I'm going to use my little anchor. This is how we're going to attach the clasp from the back side. I think they call it a washer. And so I am just going to figure out which ones I need to mark on this Peltex. And that's the second one in on both sides. There we go. And so you can see that is where the clasp is going to come through and anchor on the back side of this. And it will just poke through that washer. So now let's go ahead and flip this over and install the clasp on the front. All right, so we have our center mark there, and now I'm going to use my little scrap of Peltex, and I just want to center that as well. And so I can do the same thing I did, where I measure over 5.5 inches and up 5.5 inches. And since this little square is right at 2 inches, then I know if I've got just a 1-inch square in the corner here, that's pretty darn close to center, which is close enough for me. So let's take this over and press it in place, because this one is fusible. If you're not using a fusible stabilizer, then you don't need to press it. There we go. And so now that is attached. It's not going anywhere. And let's go ahead and make our marks for our little washer. So I know I'm actually going to do my little center dot again. So like I said, this is a 2-inch square. So here's the very middle of my stabilizer. And then I need to center this. And I need to measure which one of these slots in the washer the clasp is going to come through. And so that is the second one from each end. So I'm just going to mark those slits just like so. Can see what I've got going on there. And then let's grab our seam ripper. Oops, I rolled mine all the way under my table here. There we go. And we're going to carefully press through our stabilizer and our linen, and we're going to just cut these little slits. There's the first one. And the second one. And so now I can flip this over, and all that's showing on the right side of my fabric are those tiny little slits that I made. And I can just slide the clasp right in there. And then when I flip it back over, this washer is going to slide right on. And I'll just press the tabs out to either side and anchor it in place. And so then that is done. And so from here, once you have this clasp installed, you have to do this first. You're going to sandwich it, with your soft and stable and your lining fabric. And then I just did some simple straight line quilting. So here you can see we just quilted around the clasp. Obviously you don't want to get too close to that. And I just followed the lines from our squares and did simple straight line quilting all the way through it. And so now the outside panel of your bag is complete. So let's move on to the little side panels. All right, so to make the side gussets for our bag, you're going to need this piece B template from the pattern, and you're going to cut 2 of your lining, 2 of your exterior, and 2 of your stabilizer, the soft and stable pieces. And so then we are just going to sandwich together right sides up with our exterior fabric and right sides down with our lining fabric, so that the wrong sides of both fabrics are touching the stabilizer. And then we can put a few pins in here, and I'm just going to do a basting stitch around the edge. So let's just hold these in place. And I have lost my pins, so I will just use some clips because they will work too. Just put a few of these to hold everything together. And then I'm just going to take a narrow 1/8 inch seam just to hold all of this together. If you wanted to use some spray based, you could. But we want this to be a nice soft bag. just like so. And you can see how quick and easy it is to just add that basting stitch. So then after that, I went ahead and just did some straight line quilting to match what I did on the rest of the bag. So you'll see exactly how those pieces look. So now we are going to attach the side straps to these two side gussets that we made. And what I mean by that is these pieces that you see here, and those are really easy to do. You're gonna cut 2 pieces from your outside fabric that measure 2 by 15, and we're gonna press that so each end comes into the halfway of the long sides, just like this. So you can see I just folded each side in a 1/2 inch, so it turned from a 2-inch strip to a 1-inch strip. And then we are going to take our little kind of buckle, I guess, and we are going to feed this through. And right now I have it so that the folds are on the outside, which I know is a little bit different than normal. And we're going to open back up these ends now. And I'm going to sew with an 1/8 inch seam right along this side. So let's go ahead and take this to the machine. There we go, just like so. And now we can fold in those seams that we made, and when we flip this, that is going to be enclosed. So you can see now all of our seams, including that one that we just made, are on the inside. So let's go ahead and press this really quick so it will lay nice and flat. And now we're going to sew a nice big box from about, I don't know, a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch down from the buckle, whatever is far enough to keep it out of the way of your presser foot. And we're just going to do a nice narrow 1/8 inch all the way around to make a nice long box on this. So let's go ahead and do that. So I will back stitch at the start and stop. Keep my needle down and pivot. And the same thing here. And I'm just watching to see when I get up to that same height as I was on the other side. One more stitch and turn. And back stitch. There we go. So I have the other one of these already complete. So you're going to make 2 just like that. So we're going to attach that to the inside of our side gusset. And so I actually just typically eyeball things like that. It says to measure down 1.5 inches. So if you want to, you can get out your ruler. But my goodness, look how close that was. I don't know why that works out, but it just does. And then of course you want to center it along here. And this is 3.5 inches across, and so I'm just going to make sure that my little strap is centered, and that looks great. And so now I can just do another box with an X in it to anchor this to my side gusset. So I'll stitch that box first. And I'm trying to match as close to that first one that I stitched as possible, but this is going to be inside your bag, so it is not a big deal. There we go. Now I'm going to turn and go corner to corner. And then once more in the other direction. There we go. And so that's how you're going to do that. We have both of those ready to go now because I made my other one. And so now we're going to set those aside for a minute and we're going to make our inside pocket. So to make the zipper pocket, I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, but we're using a 12-inch zipper. And initially I'm going to go ahead and I am just going to baste this one end because I'm actually going to get rid of this zipper stop because I'll be trimming it down to get the size that I want. So I'm just going to, just on this other side of the lock on the zipper head, I'm going to do a row of stitches. And I've made sure the zipper head is out of the way, and I'm just holding these together with my fingers. And I'm going to back stitch over that again. There we go. Perfect. So now that's going to be anchored once I trim this down. So to begin with, let's go ahead and cut off that first side. I'm just going to lay my ruler on here and trim that off. And now, because my zipper is closed on this side, I'm going to measure over 9 inches. And so here is 9 inches. 10 plus 9 is 19. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this side as well. Lost my rotary cutter. There we go. Just like so. And I'm going to go ahead and baste just like I did on the other side, just to be safe, because I don't want this to run any risk of having my zipper head fall off, and I want to keep everything together. So I've just put a row of stitches there just to help hold it all together. So now I have these 1 by 2 inch pieces that I've cut from my lining fabric, and we are going to line this up. Oops, lost my zipper there. We're going to line this up so that the right sides of the fabric is facing the zipper, and I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam on both sides of this zipper. So now I'm going to take a full 1/4 inch seam, which means that that basting line that we did will be within the seam allowance. So there's that one. And then I can flip this around and do the same thing on the other side. I'm actually going to move this zipper down just a little bit more so it's completely out of my way. And a 1/4 inch seam again. There we go, and now we can press these back. There's one, and then the other. And we're going to top stitch across both of those. There we go, and the other side. Beautiful. So then our zipper is all secured, both of our ends now. We don't have to worry about losing our zipper head. That is good to go. And so now we're just going to trim this up because we want it to measure 11 inches. So let me lay this on my mat. And it does need just a little bit of trimming. So I'm going to move it over here. And I'm just going to kind of center my zipper and cut a little bit off each end so that this finishes at 11. So we'll cut this little bit off here. There we go. And then I can flip this around, line it up exactly now, and cut this little bit off here. Perfect. So now our zipper part is ready. So then you're going to cut from both your lightweight interfacing and your lining fabric. You're going to cut 4 of these rectangles that measure 11 by 6.5. And we are going to now sandwich our zipper in between. And so now you can see, because we trimmed this up, our zipper fits exactly along that rectangle, just like so. And so then right sides together, we're going to sandwich our zipper in between. And so let me grab a few clips. I like to use clips when I'm working with zippers as opposed to pins. So we'll just put a few of these in here to hold it all together and make sure the edges stay nice and lined up. If you need to switch to a zipper foot on your machine, you're of course going to want to do that before you start stitching this down. So now would be the time to switch it up. Alrighty, and then we're just going to sew this down. right. And so now we can open that up. We can take it over here to our ironing board, and we're going to give this a nice press. So I like to start from the back side first and just roll my lining back away from the zipper. Just like so. That looks nice. And now we can flip it over and make sure the top is laying nice as well. Perfect. All right, so then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. And then we're just going to top stitch, which I have that part done. So you can see our zipper is now sandwiched in between, and I've done a line of top stitching on either side. And so this is our inside pocket. So now we have all of the components for our bag body. So let's go ahead and start putting this together. So you can see I've top stitched on either side here, and our zipper is now sandwiched in the middle. And so now the last step to prepare this pocket is we're just going to fold this with the zipper inside, and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along this bottom edge, leaving the sides open for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Again, if you want to use pins, you are more than welcome. I feel pretty comfortable with this seam. Just stop to make sure everything is staying lined up as you go. There we go. So now that we've done that, we can turn this right sides out. Just like that. And let's give this bottom edge a good press. Just kind of roll it with my fingers a little bit first to make sure it's laying smoothly, and then we'll press that down with the iron. Lovely. All right, so now that that is all pressed, we have all of the components for our bag body ready, and we can start assembling this together. So now we're going to go back to our quilted section that we have here, and we're going to measure up 10 inches from the straight side of our bag, and we're going to place the bottom side of our pocket, so that's the side without the zipper, at that 10-inch line. So let me just double check, make sure this is straight. With that clasp, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky, so I just want to make sure I have it all lined up. There we go, and I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple clips and clip that in place on both sides, making sure it's laying nice and flat. There we go. I need one more clip. And then we are going to top stitch down and across the bottom and back up the other side. So let's go ahead and move this down. And I'm doing a narrow seam here. There we go. Now I will rotate, so straight across the bottom. And back up this other side. Oops-a-daisies. All right, there we go. Now our pocket is attached. You can see it kind of creates this secondary pocket behind, and our zipper is there in the front. And so now let's go ahead and mark the rest of the areas for our hardware. And so to begin with, we have these side grommets that you'll see where the strap comes through in the bag. And so those we are going to measure 1.5 inches up from our zipper pocket on both sides and 1 inch in. And so I'm going to make a mark. You can see I've got the 1 inch line along the edge of the bag, and I can see my 1.5 inch mark right there. So I'm just going to make a dot right there at that 1.5 inch mark so I remember where it is. And I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. Ooh. There we go. Just like so. And so now, if you're not familiar with grommets like this, we are going to open this up and it pops apart like that. And so then we're going to want to center the grommet over that mark that we just made. And I'm going to draw and trace this shape here, because that's the shape that we're going to want to cut out. I'm going to do that on both sides. And I'm just eyeballing this, making sure it's centered. There we go. Just like so. And so again, even though this is a little bit bigger, I still like to use my seam ripper to make these cuts. It's just so much easier. And so I am just going to slide right along that edge and then slowly curve around. And these are pretty forgiving. I know when I made my first bag, I was really nervous about this part, but once you put that hardware over the top, you are good to go. Let me get this little piece from the front because it's not wanting to slide through. There we go. You can see now I've got just a little opening cut there. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. You always want to be working away from yourself. There we go. That last little bit. This is one way to know if your seam ripper is sharp, because it will just go through all those layers with no trouble. And so then you'll notice on your grommets, one of the pieces has these little prongs that poke up. Hopefully you guys can see that. And so we're going to poke that through from the right side of our bag, just like so. Whoop. And see, I can flip this over and it looks like I didn't cut quite enough. See, I was being careful and I need to cut a little bit more. So it's always good to check that. There we go. You can even get in here if your scissors are nice and sharp and snip off just a little bit more, because we don't want it to peek through the hardware. We want it to have a nice, beautiful finish. Let me try this one more time. I'm getting closer. Need to make it just a little bit wider. Go. All right, that is going to be great once I get my second piece on. And so now I just want to make sure that I don't have any fabric poking through. All right, so then now I can take my other piece and I just kind of flip this over and I make sure that my fabric is tucked inside. This back piece kind of has like a little ridge on it, and so I like to push against that and make sure none of my raw edges are going to show through. And then I'll put my pronged piece back in place. All right, so now I have that in. If you want, you can press with your fingers to kind of initially start locking those little clasps in place. They are very hard to move though, so if you have a small screwdriver or something that you can press against them, that is really helpful. And so I'm just going to use the flat end of the screwdriver to lock that in place, and you can see how beautifully that turns out. So now I'm just going to repeat that and get this other side installed, and I will meet you right back here. All right, so I've gone ahead and installed both of these grommets, and you see I have those done. And then I went ahead and marked for our last locking clasp. This is the last little bit of hardware we need to install in the body of this bag. And so you can see I just measured down 1 inch from this top edge, that's the edge with the curve, and found the center and made a mark. And then I drew a circle using the inside of my little clasp, and I made a mark using a pin with each of these screw holes. So you can see if you set this piece in, here's the center all cut out, and then I marked those dots. Now that I have that done, I actually want to take my scissors and I want to cut out a little bit more, because we're going to come out past those screw holes. So we just need to cut out a little bit more of this bulk and widen this up. So I'm just going to snip this, and we're going to come out here on this side to that mark. Make sure I'm getting through all the layers of our fabric and our stabilizer, and then the same thing on this side. And you can see it does not have to be perfect. All of this is going to get enclosed in our clasp. And so now I have a nice large opening. I need to trim off just a little bit more of this piece from my front fabric. I can see that I missed it. There we go. And so now I can take my clasp, and now I have a large enough opening that you can see, I can see the opening and the 2 screw holes through my fabric, but it doesn't go out past the edge of the clasp. And so now I can sit this side right on top of it, and you can see it all just matches neatly. Now when you're working with these little tiny screws, you want to be really careful not to lose them because they're very small. And so sometimes I like to have like a piece of masking tape, and I'll make a little loop and I'll just stick the screws to that so I don't have to worry about them rolling off my table. And then we are just going to install these with our little screwdriver. There's one, and one more on this side. All right, there we go. We have that clasp in now. It looks beautiful. And so I can take this little protective layer off of the top. And if you want to test that out, the screws should be towards the inside on your lining fabric. And this is just going to loop around, and you can see how that's going to work. So now we can attach our side gussets. We are down to the very end here. And so I've gone ahead and I measured using my ruler and made a mark 3/8 of an inch up from our zipper pocket here. There's just a little black line, and 3/8 from this bottom edge. And that is the mark for our side gussets. And so I can just line the top up with that first mark. And we are just going to pull this around And this other side comes up 3/8 of an inch as well. And then we can install our side gussets by stitching all the way around on both sides. And so this one will go in just like this, and we will finish this off. And so let me put a few more pins in here, and then we'll take this to the machine. Okay, so I have all my Wonder Clips here holding the gussets on, and you'll notice our raw edges are pointing out. That's the correct way because we're going to bind this so we can finish this off beautifully at the end. So I just want to make sure my little side straps that I attach to the gusset are out of the way, and I'm going to use a scant 1/4 inch and sew all the way around this curve on both sides. So let's go ahead and do that now. Going around that curve is probably the trickiest part, but we've made it. And it's smooth sailing all the way down the other side. All right, and now we're just going to repeat that same thing on the other side. That's what we're looking for right there. All right, there we go. It's really starting to look like a sling bag now, isn't it? All right, so you're going to finish off these edges using bias binding. I have that made here. You're just going to attach it just like you would normal binding. But I'm going to go ahead and skip over that part because I feel like that's pretty straightforward. And let's talk about making the last little strap. And so remember, we have these little side straps. Those are going to poke through the grommets that we added on the top. So there's one, and here is the other, just like so. There we go. You can see how that's going to work. And then we are going to make the top strap. And so I have that. So for this piece, we cut a 4" by width of fabric, and we have just folded that in half, and then each of those halves inside and pressed it. And then I've done a nice, box all the way around to hold that finished edge. So just top stitched it on both sides, and we've got this beautiful strap. So then now the last remaining piece of our hardware from this kit is this little slide, and that is what's going to make our strap adjustable. It's how we can change the length here. You can see we can go all the way over to make it much shorter, whatever your preference is. And so let's go ahead and start by taking this side of our buckle, and I've slid it through once, and so you can see just like that. And then now I'm going to flip this back on itself, and you just need a little bit of room to work. And we're going to do the same thing that we did when we attached our side straps in. We're going to make a little box here with an X to attach that together. So let's go ahead and do that first. There we go. can go corner to corner. And come back and do this other direction as well. There we go. And so now that slide is attached on one side. So now, let's pretend this edge is already lovely and bound. And then we are going to slide this through. Make sure I've got it correctly. There we go. We're going to slide this through this way. And then we can feed this. So you'll notice my buckle's on this end, it's facing up. And then we can slide this piece through it again. You following? And then back down. So that little loop that I made is on the bottom side, the inside of my strap. And so then now we'll just take this side and loop it through this other little loop, and we'll do the exact same thing we did on the other side and just make our box. I like to always flip it over so I can see here. And we will make our box with our X. There we go. Move all those out of the way. There we go. So now we have a finished strap. And you can see on our beautiful finished bag, once you add that bias binding, how great it all turns out. We can open our cute little clasp, and we have that zipper pocket that we made inside. It's just such a fun little sling bag. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the Spring Sling bag. Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching At Home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.